So here is the A to Z Bumblebee Atlas. How do I document all these species that I now have every idea but no idea how to identify? So first of all, one of the cool things about these color patterns in bumblebees, as long as we get the right pictures, there's no need to destructively sample bumblebees. We don't need to kill them to know which species are living where. And so, using field identifications and good diagnostic photos is generally working, or can work. I did mention earlier, and I'll say it again, that there's great value to museum records. There's no, generally, especially if you're just taking a worker from a colony, you're not going to be hurting the population. You're just going to be helping to document it and help documenting that information for long term. So if you're interested or want to do a little bit of collecting, or you're interested in starting your own collection even, please contact Ross, contact me. We're happy to answer questions and help you find the resources that you need. How do I look? Good thing to do is to identify good habitat. Good habitat is going to be almost anywhere with abundant wildflowers. If there's wildflowers, there's likely to be bumblebees. I say be flexible here because some of the resources that I've put together show you how to sort of help plan your survey before you go out in the field. So looking at aerial maps within your grid cell, trying to pick out open areas. Don't be so firm that if you get to that area and there aren't flowers there, don't feel like you have to survey there. Feel free to move somewhere else where there are flowers. Be as flexible as you can in your grid cell. It's really important to look at all species of blooming plants. We're really, as humans, I think we're attracted to really showy flowers, and we're attracted to just watching those big, abundant, showy flowers. But when we do that, we might miss some of the smaller bodied bees that are, down in the hydrophyllum or some of the smaller flowers. It's really important to spend equal amount of time on all of the flowers that are out there. We're going to net and capture every bumblebee that we find, as long as you're comfortable with that. And then the best thing to do if you want to take these great photos to identify, or I can't remember who asked the question, is if you have a cooler with you, you can put a bee in a chilled cooler for 10 minutes and it will basically chill to the point of not moving anymore. It'll be like a specimen. You could hold it in your hand and take whatever photos that you need to, and then set it in the shade and it will slowly warm up and fly away as if nothing ever happened to it. It's a really great way to take diagnostic photos without harming the bee. And as far as we can tell, people have done research. It doesn't seem to have any effects, long-term effects on the bee itself. And then the other thing we're going to ask you to do is conduct a habitat survey. So you have data sheets in the folders that I've given you. They're also available on the website. There's also a copy of them in the handbook that we printed out for each of you. And in the back there, you're going to go through each habitat area and answer some basic questions about what flowering plants that you find, what are the other resources important for bees you're finding, as well as what kinds of management activities are you seeing on the landscape. And all of that information will help us to address this question of what kinds of habitats are important for bumblebees as we start thinking about how we might manage property or do restoration projects to benefit bumblebees. That's what we need to know a lot. So those habitat surveys are going to be very important. And we'll go over some of the specific techniques. Ross and I will show you how to net a bee. We'll show you how to put a bee in a vial and all of that stuff when we go outside in a little bit. For those of you watching on the web, Ross and I made a bunch of videos yesterday that will be available on the website in a couple of weeks, Ross, is that right? By the end of May? So where should I look for bumblebees? Wildflower meadows are great. Riparian areas, grasslands, wetlands, really anywhere with abundant, attractive flowers in bloom. I've mentioned this before, but we will really want to look in mid to late summer when those workers are active, because they're going to be the most abundant. You're going to be most likely to encounter them. And then you're also a little less likely to get those males, which are, as you remember, are less or harder to identify from photographs. And I'm not sure if I said this or not, but all of that identification information I just shared with you those were only females. I didn't talk about males at all. The male color patterns are often quite different. So you can leave that work up to me identifying the males in my team. So we still want photos of males, but they're going to be harder for you to identify in the field. It doesn't mean you can't try. You have all the resources you need, but they're going to be harder. So that June, July, August period is going to be the best period to be out looking for them. These are the equipment that we think that you probably want to have with you. Just remember, some of the places you go to survey might not have cell service, so being wholly dependent on your iPhone to give you Google or Apple Maps isn't a great idea. Bring a map with you, a paper map. They still make them. Actually, the Atlas and Gazetteers are really great resources that have really pretty detailed, good maps, including dirt roads, which a lot of the other maps, road state maps, don't necessarily have. Very great resource. Data sheets, field guide, a net if you can have one. If you adopt a grid cell today, and then you're the first person to adopt the grid cell, you can go home with a net, a cooler, and vials. And again, we have in addition to taking chilling bees, Ross actually invented this really cool photo chamber where you can actually capture a bee directly in here. And there's a piece of paper on here now. It's a really high quality plexiglass in the front. And there's a foam plunger on the back here. And so you can actually push the bee just gently against the plexiglass and pin it there, and then take a nice clear photo through the plexiglass, and it actually works brilliantly. Some of the other vials that we have, the plastic is not as clear, and it tends to scratch up, and it's curved. So when you take photos through this, your phone or your camera will have a hard time focusing on the bee. It'll focus on the surface of the material, but this actually is a really brilliant invention by Mr. Ross Winton there in the back of the room. And if you adopt a grid cell, you can get one of those as well as some of those vials. So we can provide some of this to a lot of you, and at the other trainings in person, they'll be available as well. Good idea to bring a camera and a smartphone, or a smartphone, and extra batteries or a phone charger, phone charger. And then if you don't have a smartphone, getting a GPS unit or a way to find the lat long would be really, really helpful. And then obviously take care of yourself. Bring food, bring water, bring a hat, sunscreen. I didn't put it on here, but bring friends too. This is much more fun with friends. As far as if you've adopted a grid cell, which is really the level of engagement that we're hoping most of you here will take, you're going to formally adopt a grid cell, there's two options to conduct surveys in there. You can do what's called what we're calling a point survey or a standard survey, or a roadside survey. I'm going to go through each of those in a little bit more detail, starting with a point survey. So the great thing about our point surveys is they're 45 minutes long. Each individual survey is going to be 45 minutes. So you're going to get a really good amount of information about that space that you're surveying. But remember that our grid cells are 50 kilometers by 50 kilometers, right? So one point within a 50 kilometer by 50 kilometer grid is only so much information. So the pros are that we're going to know pretty much the bumblebees that are there, but if there's not a nest nearby, we're going to miss that species because we're only doing that one point. So that's a pro and a con of these. We're going to get a lot of detailed information about one place or two places in your grid cell. So those are the kind of the pros and cons. Another pro, I should say, is in contrast to roadside surveys, is that we tend to get a lot of invasive plants along our roadsides because vehicles and people tend to be the ones spreading those seeds. And so because we're interested in what native plants bumblebees are using, we're going to get that information from these point surveys. We're going to know what native plants they're using more so than the roadside surveys, and that's another benefit of them. So again, planning a point survey, you want to think about safety, what kind of land am I using? You want to make sure on public land or that you have permission to sample on that land. And again, remain flexible. Don't let your planning process at home affect your experience in the field. Be willing to be adaptable and move to a different location if you need to, and share your plans with somebody else. Maybe I'll just show you this one video. I'll make you watch a DM video for just a couple minutes, because I feel like this particular one is pretty helpful in terms of you thinking about, okay, how do I I have my grid cell. How do I move forward from there? I think this one will be a little bit helpful. We'll skip the rest of them. So I can pause that if you want to write down that URL, if anybody wants to write it down. So what I've done with this URL is Google Maps has this feature called My Maps. If you're familiar with GIS, you can basically create your own map and you can add features. I've created a map there that has all the grid cells on it. And you can copy that map and make your own map using just your own grid cells. And that's basically what I'm showing you how to do in this little video. But that's the URL where you'll find the Google map with the grid cells on it. The URL is also available on the website. But I thought I'd just pause it there in case you wanted to write it down.
You can start by making a copy of the map so that you can edit it and add your own features.
Can everybody hear it? So if you click there, you'll see all the grid cells listed. You can scroll down and find your grid cell. If you highlight it, it'll highlight it in there, and then you can actually zoom into it.
Once you found your own grid cell, then you can make a copy of it and add it to your map as its own
So
layer.
if you click Add Layer there, then you can draw. You can select the Draw tool, which is, we can't see it, unfortunately, because of this blocky thing here, but there's a Draw tool up here where you can basically just trace your grid cell, and then you'll have your grid cell and only your grid cell on your map, and you can turn the other one off. I'm just tracing the grid cell here, just creating my own square. And then you can name it however you want to. And then you can just turn that other layer off because we don't need it anymore. I just have my grid cell. Then you can change it so that there's no fill in there, which is what I'm doing here. Just turning the transparency up all the way, and now I can see my entire grid cell.
Your own grid cell, you can change the map so that it shows aerial imagery rather than a map itself.
Now I'm going to change the base map to show aerial photographs rather than the map itself. Now you can zoom in and actually see where trees are and where there aren't any trees. And if I'm going to hike the PCT here, I can look for an open meadow along the PCT. And there's an open meadow.
Add a pin to the map and give it a name.
Just drop the pin, give it a name. And then you can, the other thing that's important here, the next thing I'm going to do is choose that draw tool again, and I'm just going to draw a polygon kind of around there because I want to make sure there's at least a hectare of space. A point survey needs to be a hectare in area, so you want to make sure there's at least a hectare there. A hectare is around 2.5 acres for those of you that aren't familiar with that terminology. It's about 100 meters by 100 meters. And as soon as you finish drawing the polygon here, you see it tells you how big it is. This is 1.66 acres. So it's not quite big enough. I need to make that one a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. And then, you know, it's now almost 2.5 acres. So that's good. This could be a site that would work. I might mark this on the map. And you can, use that while you're out in the field to try to find locations. So that's just, you might find that useful if you're interested in, if you don't know where you're going to sample within your grid and you want to find the spot, you might find, whoops, that useful.
What was that website again? Is that available somewhere?
You can find it from Bumblebee. Here, I can go back to the URL at the beginning if that's helpful. There's the URL if you want to write it down or take a picture of it.
So maybe I'm getting ahead of you, but a friend and I signed up for our grid, but
Yep.
somebody else may have already signed up. Do we need to coordinate to make sure we're distributed?
You can. I mean, I haven't been sharing that information just because some people might have privacy concerns, and so I don't know how to do that the best way. I mean, one of the things. Yeah, I think it's very unlikely that you're going to sample the same location just because they're so big. The grid cells are so big. Yes.
Okay, so I'm not realize this. So are you saying that more than one person can sample the same grid cell?
Yes.
So even though, because I went in to crossing sent out to look for good cell to adopt. And I saw that some that I was planning on were taken.
Yep.
So are you saying I can still do a survey there?
We locked them after 3. So once 3 people had adopted a grid cell, we mostly because, and I'll be honest with you, you still can. We would love your data from any grid cell that's out there, but we need to cover the whole state. And if you want to participate, we're just asking you to travel a little bit further to do it because we really need people to spread out across the landscape. So if you want to sample the red grid cell, great, but please do another one too. I mean, that's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So red are taken, yellow are, what's the difference?
Green, nobody's adopted at all yet. Yellow,
Yellow.
at least one person,
Okay.
but less than 3 people have adopted.
Okay,
And red, 3 people have adopted it.
Okay, so you're out looking at your site and you find one bee. Doesn't one bee take one of these sheets, and then if I see another bee and collect it, same time? I have
We'll
to
get there. We'll
oh,
get there. Yeah. Yep. No problem. So, as you're going through this planning process that I just showed, you'd probably want to select a few options, a few areas that might be good. What we're asking you is to do this twice. And twice can mean 2 different locations in the same grid cell on the same day, or it could mean the same location on 2 different days. Or you could go back to the same location. Either one of those 2 things will work. An individual survey is 45 minutes long. Okay, during that 45 minutes, you're going to be out there with a net or with a vial collecting bees. Each bee you collect, or every couple of bees, you're going to transfer those to the cooler, and then you're going to go about your survey. While you're putting a bee into a vial or putting the vial into the cooler, you pause your timer. You want the 45 minutes to be search time, not time spent putting a bee into a cooler. Right? So we want to have to even that out by measuring search time and not transfer time. And then you're going to actually collate your data afterwards. So at the end, when you have basically a cooler that is full of bees, you'll probably have anywhere from 10 to 20 bees, I would guess. Maybe if it's a gray area, you probably could get as many as 50. It's possible in that amount of time. Then you're going to sit down and your bees are going to be chilled, and then you're going to go through that process of taking photos of them. And again, what we need is the abdomen, the thorax, the head, and then if it's a yellow-faced, yellow-striped bee, we need that picture of the underside of the abdomen. And you can use your photo chamber, or honestly, with a chilled bee, you can just pour the bee out into your hand or onto a white piece of paper and snap a photo of it. And then you're going to put all that information onto the bumblebee. This is the bumblebee data sheet, the one that looks like this. And so after all your bees are in your cooler, each line is going to be an individual bee. You're going to put the species of bee, the plant that you found it on, and then the photo numbers of the photos that you took of it. So you're going to put each photo, you can look at the information from the photo on your camera or your phone, find out the file name, so that later when you go to enter your data in Bumblebee Watch, you know which photos go with which specimen. Yes?
if we're not able to identify the host, do you want us to put a picture of it?
Yeah, that would be ideal. And one of the things you're going to do when you do the habitat assessment is take photos of all the species of flowers. So it'd be great if you can get your diagnostic photos and just 1 or 2 photos. You could actually include a 3rd photo on Bumblebee Watch of the flower itself. And that would be great. Yeah, that's very helpful. So that's the ins and outs really of just the bumblebee part of a point survey. Does anyone have any other questions? And again, you have a handbook, and I think the website has all this information. So there's more, you don't have to get it all right now, but I'm here. So if you have questions, please do ask.
Yes, when you say it's 45 person minutes, if there are 2 of you, are you working?
You're doing it for 22, and each of you is 22 and a half minutes. Yeah, 3 people would be 15 minutes. You just divide 45 minutes by the number of people in your survey.
But if you have 2 people or 3 people for a grid, why don't you go do 145 and the other person would do it?
If it's 3 individual people that are surveying, yes, they would each be 45 minutes. But if you and 2 friends went to one site to do a survey, the time period, each of you would do it for 15 minutes. Yeah. Yes.
So in the survey method, it talks about temperature, but is there a particular time of day that's preferable?
Not really. I mean, bees pretty much run banker's hours, so 9 to 5 is pretty reliable. This time of year, 9 might be a little early. You might wait for it to warm up a little bit. Yeah, like 60 to 90 degrees. If it's a really hot day, later in the afternoon, bees will just hunker down because bumblebees are especially cool weather specialists. They don't like to be out when it's too hot, and they'll be under the ground. So, yeah, as long as the temperature's right, they'll be out and about.
So you should take a thermometer with you?
No, I mean, I think come June and throughout most of the Pacific Northwest, you're gonna know when the temperature's right. I mean, if you feel comfortable, I think it's pretty fair to say that bumblebees are out. I mean, if you go out and you don't see anything flying, I just wouldn't conduct a survey. But we do ask you to collect the weather data, but you don't have to do that in real time. You can go home. There's many different weather sites and apps that you can find a nearby weather station where you can pull that information from. And we have information about how to do that on the website too. And if you just have to guess on the temperature, I think that's really fine too. I mean, mostly you want to know, is it warm, hot, or really hot? And that's kind of what we want to know. Yeah. All right. So that's a point survey. Another option to fulfill your requirement of 2 surveys is you could do a roadside survey. So in other words, another option would be I could do a roadside survey on the way to my point survey. That would be, you'd be done. Your grid cell would be fully surveyed. The great thing about roadside surveys is instead of getting a great deal of information about one location, we're getting a little bit less information, but on more spots throughout the landscape, right? So we're getting sort of a broader information across the landscape, but maybe a little bit less detailed information at each one of those points. So a roadside survey is going to be, you're going to take a section of road that's around 10 miles long, and you're going to sample 5 locations along that 10-mile section. Each section has to be separated by at least a half of a mile. Okay, but each survey is only 15 minutes instead of 45 minutes. So it's going to be a shorter survey at more locations. And from that, we're going to get, instead of just getting one point, we're going to get a little bit better idea of that region, what bumblebees are there. Again, especially with roadside surveys, your personal safety is the most important thing. You're on a road, be really careful. Don't get hit by a car. Be careful where you park your car. Be careful that you're on, public spaces. Be wary of personal property and private land. That said, I think within about 8 feet of a road is a public right-of-way, right? So you can sample those public rights-of-way. They are open for survey, and that's really the area that we envision people will be surveying, is truly those roadsides. This is another video about how to plan a 10-mile route or to look for a 10-mile route. Because I've gone longer than I said I was going to, I'm not going to show it to you now, but it's on the website. You can watch it at PNW Bumble Bee Atlas.org. So again, it's 10 miles long, 5 stops along that route that are separated by more than a half mile, and each individual survey is 15 person minutes.
How big of an area is there?
You just basically want a patch of flowers, and you're going to spend 15 minutes at that patch of flowers. It doesn't need to be a hectare or whatever. You can imagine that even on a pretty small patch of flowers, you could watch it for 15 minutes. So the area doesn't necessarily matter, but you want to have enough flowers to keep you engaged for 15 minutes. So it's a bit of a judgment call. But what you're going to do is when you get to your survey route, your 10 miles, you're going to stop at the first place you see with abundant flowers. You're going to get out and you're going to conduct a survey. And then when you're done with that survey, you're going to get back in the car and you're going to drive at least a half mile down the road. And then you'll stop at the next location that has flowers. You can get out and do a survey and then basically repeat 5 times. Once you've finished your 5th one, you don't have to go 10 miles down the road. We're just doing at least separated by half mile. The idea is that you might not, you might have to drive 2 miles or 4 miles before you get to another section of open habitat with flowers. So that's why it's longer than just 2.5 miles.
Do you want it on the same side of the road or
Doesn't matter.
across?
Doesn't matter. Yeah. Doesn't even have to be the same road. Like if you turn on a different road, like that's totally fine. All we're trying to do is to get a little bit more separation in space. Questions about roadside surveys? Yes.
Could it be a trail?
Could it be a trail? If you're willing, I'm fine with it being a trail. You know, like if you want to walk that far, I'm totally fine with it being a trail. Yeah, sure. Any other questions about roadside surveys?
I have a non-roadside survey question. So
Okay, that's
you're
fine.
there 45 minutes. You're finding bees. You're knitting them, putting them in vials, and then cooling them typically, right?
Yeah, and I should say that you're doing the same thing with the roadside survey. So you're going to net every bee, put it in a vial, and put it in a cooler for roadside
So
survey
just
too.
keep doing that. Leave them in the cooler.
Yeah,
They can hang out for 45 minutes. It's not a big deal.
totally. Yep.
And then at the end of 45, then that would be a good time. The only reason you might not do it that way is you ran out of vials. Maybe you have to pause and
Exactly.
do what you got or something.
If you run out of vials, you got to pause. You
Pause,
document your bees,
and
and then you'd start again.
start again.
The other thing that's worth mentioning is that, you know, like you can't capture a bee into a vial in a national park and other sensitive areas. So just beware of local regulations before you just go start capturing bees and putting them in vials. Make sure you're aware of what the local regulations are for the landowner. And if you have questions, you know, ask a park ranger whether it's okay or not. Just make sure that you're careful. You don't want to get in trouble. We don't want you to get in trouble. Yes.
Just to clarify the question about putting them in the vials and cooling them along roadside surveys, I'm assuming that you stop at a point, you collect some there, you cool them, you release them there, you don't.
Correct.
Okay, you don't take them on down.
That happens. Yeah.
No, generally, like you want to release bees pretty close to where you collected them. Yeah, I mean, that's best for them.
Regarding the processing of 45 minutes, if you're releasing them prior to 45 minutes, that couldn't be recounting.
You could be. Yep. It's not ideal, but it's I don't know how, there's no other way around it, really. Bring more vials. I think we can provide you with 10, I think, but beyond that, you know, but you can use baby jars, like anything really works. So you've got options. Yeah.
So, could you describe the cooler?
You can use anything. I have like one of those little lunch coolers that I use, and you can either use those ice blocks. I actually prefer just cubed ice because then you can kind of stick the bees down into the cubed ice, and they cool down faster than they would with the thing. But you can even use a little lunch soft-sided cooler. They make fanny packs that are coolers. There are lots of options. Anything will work. Yeah.
And so the 45 minutes you're spending in this field of flowers, you're actively looking for bumblebees?
Yep.
Do you ever sweep the net just to see if you're going to catch a bumblebee? I mean,
No, I mean, I think bumblebees are showy enough that you're not just going to guess. Like you might swipe at an animal and it might end up being a fly and it might end up being a honeybee. But you wouldn't put that in a vial and collect it. But like after you swipe it, you know, you'd pause the timer at that point while you get it in a vial, and then you might look at it and say, "Oh, shoot, that's a fly. I don't need that," and let it go, and then start your timer again.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Sorry, that question was more or less.
how do you hunt a bumblebee?
Yeah, like how do I know if
Yeah.
am I just going to randomly swipe at animals? But no, you're going to see an animal on a flower, and you're going to swipe at it directly.
Okay.
Thanks
Well,
for the
half the
reminder.
time I'm just going to be looking.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. And you know, it's one of those things where the bumblebees are big enough and loud enough, you're going to be using your ears as much as you are your eyes. And it's going to be one of those situations where you might be in front of a patch of flowers and you might see a bee 10 feet away, and you might kind of run or jog a little bit and run and try to grab it. So it's fun. You're going to love it. Yeah.
If we do collect species that are not bumblebees, what do we do with that information? Do we want to use it in any way? Are we keeping it?
I don't have the capacity to do much with that. Most other bees are almost impossible to identify from photos, at least for me. There's a few people like John Asher and other people out there that can do it. I just don't have the skill. I haven't spent the time to learn that information. So I'll be honest that I don't want those photos. I don't have the time for it. I don't know what else to say.
Are there other apps?
Bug Guide would be the place to send them. Yeah. Yep. If you
Bug Guide or iNaturalist.
iNaturalist, yeah. And John Asher's active on both of those. He is basically Bug Guide. But he's also active on iNaturalist. So iNaturalist has a much nicer app. The interface on Bug Guide is, we're like, oh, an entomologist made this. Whereas Bug Guide's, made for everybody, I think. iNaturalist is, yeah. All right, so I think I've got, so the last sort of level of survey is sort of your incidental survey. Like, I'm in my backyard, I see a bumblebee. You can, of course, share that information with us. It's not, you don't have to be within an adopted grid cell to do this. You could be anywhere. Like if you want to take pictures of bumblebees and do it, great. You can do it anywhere. You can take photos. They can be directly on a flower. You don't need to collect something in a vial and cool it. You can just take a picture of a bee on a flower and upload it to Bumblebee Watch. And that's great. We would love to have you do that. You can do that anywhere, and it will help us to understand a lot of this information. It just doesn't have the effort associated with it. So that's the con. When we have a timed survey, we can start looking at abundance numbers in different locations. If we just have these incidentals, we don't know how much time you spent looking or trying to take that individual photo. So it's just a different level of information. It's still helpful, but it doesn't necessarily help as much as the other types do. But please, if you enjoy taking pictures of bumblebees and want to share those photos with us, share them with us. Those are just the pros and cons that I just talked about. Anyone have any questions about that? No. So again, what do I need to document? What kind of photos do I need to take to document these different species? For every individual, I've listed 5 things here. That doesn't mean you need to take 5 different photos, right? Some of these will come from, you can get with a single photo. Right on the photo that you see there of that bee in that jar, I can see the color pattern on the thorax, and I can see the color pattern on the abdomen, and I can see the hind leg. I can see all those things in just a single photo, right? So in many cases, you can do all of it with 1 or 2 photos. But I want to see the hind leg to tell whether it's a male or a female, and also tell whether it's a cuckoo or a true bumblebee. I want to be able to see the face, including what color it has on the face and on the vertex, the top of the head, okay? I want to see the color pattern on the abdomen, all 5 or 6 of the tergal segments. And then I want to see the color on the thorax here. So I want to be able to see, not just is it yellow, black, yellow, but you can see even with this one, I can see it's got that black notch in it. Which one has the black notch? Does anyone remember? Bifarius, good. Some of you guys are experts. I love it. So this is Bombus bifarius, and I can tell that because it has the notch as well as the other color pattern. So that's why I need, not just from the side, but you need to see that notch as well. And then if it has a yellow face and a single yellow stripe, we need that underside of the abdomen photo that I talked about. Again, here's another diagnostic photo. I can see there's pollen on the leg. I can actually, in this case, even see the color of the hair on the face, the top of the head. I can see the color pattern on the thorax, and I can see all of the abdominal segments. I got everything there basically in one photo. This is a chilled bee in the palm of my hand. So you can see just like how easy it is to document sometimes. And then this is the yellow face, single yellow stripe. Here's that belly photo that I take, right? So this is a chilled bee, and it's just chilling, and I'm just holding it, and I was able to snap a photo of its abdomen, the underside of its abdomen. You can see clearly those yellow stripes. So that's Bombus caliginosus. And then when you're done documenting all of your bumblebees, you've taken a photo of them, you've written down all that information, including the photo file numbers, then we're asking you to do what we call a rapid habitat assessment. This is what the bumblebee data sheet looks like. You have them in your area. And then oops, sorry, I got a little bit ahead of myself there. So after that, then when you get back home, then you're going to log into Bumble Bee Watch and submit all of your observations there. Again, you don't need to include every photo that you took of every bee. I really just need those useful photos, and follow the tips that are on the website as well. There's a video you can watch on the website that shows that if you've never used Bumble Bee Watch before, it walks you through the whole step between uploading a photo and entering all the information that you need to. A pretty new feature of Bumble Bee Watch, if you haven't used it in a while or you started using it a while ago and then stopped, is now we have the ability to enter site information. So once you've entered information from one site, then in the future you can just re-choose that site, and it adds the latitude and longitude and site information for you automatically, which makes the process a little bit more seamless. And all that's described in this video that I'm not going to make you sit through right now. And then afterwards, sorry, I got ahead of myself before, we're going to ask you to fill out this habitat information. And this is basically, you've now spent 45 or 15 minutes wandering around this site, and you actually have a pretty good idea of what's there. You're going to know a lot about what you saw, but we just want you to document this using this form. So you're going to fill out the top, which is, you know, the site name information, the grid cell that you're in, the date. You're going to pull the latitude and longitude if you can, and then, you know, you write a description of the site. Then you're going to scroll down, and again, this data sheet's in your packets there, so you can look through it as I go through it. And then I'm going to ask you to choose what is the number one, how would you describe the area that you surveyed? Is it a roadside? Is it a developed park? Is it a suburban yard? Is it a park? You know, is it a dunes? Is it grasslands? You're just going to circle one of those in this top area here. And then below here, you're going to circle all of the areas that might be surrounding. Is there an agricultural field next to you? Is there a suburban yard next to you? Are you in a natural area next to a suburban yard? We want to have some idea what's nearby. Then you're going to take a look at your overall area. How much of it had flowers in it? Was it 0 to 10%? Was it 50 to 60%? Or was it 90%? And we're just asking you to estimate that and then circle whichever one is most appropriate. And then we want to know, how many species of flower did you see? Was there one species? Was there 7? Or was there more than 10? All this information helps us know more and why bumblebees might be active. Yeah.
Yeah, percent area covered in flowers. Is that actual floral cover, or are you talking plants?
Yeah, more, not like, yeah, because it'd be impossible to get to 100, right? It's more like, I mean, yeah, like plant coverage. How much of the plants that you see are flowering, I guess, is really what I want to know. Yeah. And then over here, these are all features in this box here. These are features that contribute to nesting habitat for bumblebees. So we want to know, do you see any bunch grasses? Do you see evidence of rodents? Do you see brush piles? Do you see some bare soil? Do you see leaf litter? Is there pine needles nearby or rock piles? And you're going to circle all those things that you saw during your survey. And then you're going to go down here, and there's a bunch of just questions. Is there evidence that people mow this area? Is there evidence of cattle grazing or natural grazing? And just yes, no, or suspect. You're not going to know a lot of this information. All we're asking you to do is the best that you can. And if, you know, this shouldn't take you more than 5 or 15 minutes to do. I think it's pretty quick to just go through it, especially after you've been walking the site for a long time. You should have a good idea of it. So this is what it looks like filled out. You've circled the appropriate areas. And then on the back, we are asking you to, if you can, or to the best of your ability, to document each species of flower that you see, to put the common name and the scientific name if you can, and then also to document those photos. And then you're going to go to PNW Bumble Bee Atlas.org. There's a video here that shows you how to enter all that habitat information, and you're going to share that information with us there. It's basically a form that basically follows the guide. You're just transferring the information from your data sheet into our database. It's really important with all of these data. Sometimes people, even field scientists, have a tendency to collect all this field data, and then they put their data sheets in a drawer. And they're like, oh, I'll enter that data at the end of the season, right? And then you go and you start entering your data and you realize that you left something off or you didn't do it, right? And you forgot to fill out part of the data sheet. If you're trying to do that 6 weeks after you collected the data, you're not going to remember what you had. So try to enter your data as close to your survey as you can. And then I just have, these is just a bunch of videos like, how do I use Google Maps to help me find the latitude and longitude? How can I download a Google map onto my phone so that it works if I don't have cell service? And just little tips that I think are going to be helpful. And then just basic summary. And then the last thing that we really want you all to do, partially because, you know, like if Ross and I were going to do all of this by ourselves, it would take, we couldn't do it, right? It would take years of us out there on the landscape trying to do this. And so what we want to try to gather is how much effort did we all put into this? And so even, I know we're asking you to collect and enter a lot of data, but we also want you to fill out this volunteer form here. So we want you to log in, and there's just a quick survey that says how much time you spent and how much energy you spent traveling to and from your field sites. And that just helps us understand how much effort really went into this so that we can talk about it and share, like, this is such a cool thing that all of these people got together and put this much effort into it. And that just helps us measure that. So please do fill out your volunteer data. And again, there's information about how to do that on the website. It's just a simple form questions that you would answer, and you can do it right from our website. I'm basically done now. I know I've been talking for like 6 hours and my throat is dry and you're totally overwhelmed. You've heard way too much. I think, you know, like, this isn't the end of our relationship. I think I have a ton of resources for you. I think the website we put together has everything you need. You can call me, you can email me, you can reach out to the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game, or the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife for help. There's a Facebook group we started where you could try to connect with people that have adopted your same grid cell if you want to try to do that on your own or combine forces. So anyway, I think there's a ton of resources out there, and I hope that you will try to make use of them. If you need something that's not there, please let me know and I can try to provide it for you. If this was really interesting to you and you want more information, my partners in Oregon, the Oregon Bee Atlas, are doing this I'm doing the bumblebee part of it, and they're doing it for all of the other species of bees. So you can get more engaged, and they are leading a 4-day bee identification course in Corvallis, where they're going over the taxonomy of all these other native bees. So if you want to, you know, you're all in and you want to go to the next step, there are deeper trainings that are available. So please, you know, if you're interested, go for it.
Are those two separate sessions?
They are 2 separate sections, yeah. Yep. And just, I've been up here all day, but I could not have been up here all day without Ross's help. My colleague at Xerces, Michelle Blackburn, has been incredibly helpful in putting all these materials together. My colleague in Washington, Ann Potter, and then my other colleague at Xerces, Serena Jepson. I couldn't have done it without him. And then obviously without some funding from ISSSP, which you're not familiar here in Idaho, but this is a collaboration between the BLM and the Forest Service in Oregon and Washington. It stands for Interagency Sensitive Species and Special Status Program. Many thanks to the Fish and Wildlife Service for funding this competitive state wildlife grant. Couldn't be here without them, and then the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research. That's it. Yeah. The next thing I will say is we have, for anybody that has adopted a grid cell, we have t-shirts for you. We have nets for people and vials. If you haven't adopted a grid cell yet and you want to, there's a computer up here where you could do it. You could also use your phone if you want to. You can do it when you get home. You just won't get a t-shirt then. But yeah, and you know, we'll probably take a little bit of a break here, and then Ross and I can go outside and show you guys some techniques for netting bees and putting bees into vials, and you know, maybe answer other questions that you might have. But thank you so much for coming today. And I will also just say that, two more things. One, you know, even I mentioned collecting volunteer data. Obviously, you spending your time here today is part of that. So you can just fill out the volunteer survey, you know, just from your time today. We'd love to know how far you traveled and the time that you spent here. There's also an evaluation form in your folder there that sort of asks a series of questions about how you feel your knowledge was before and after this course, and then just asks, you know, kind of basic survey questions. I would love it if you took a few minutes to fill that out. I'm doing 6 of these this year, and I'll be doing many more of them next year. And I'd love to know how to make it better for you. I know it's a lot of sitting, and I'm not sure how much I could do about that, but I appreciate your patience and kindness. If you guys are watching on the webinar, I think Ross or Michelle shared the URL where you can fill it out directly online, and that would be awesome too. I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you guys a lot for spending your Saturday with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.